Chapter 12. There's 13 chapters. U.S. boycotting of the 1980 Olympics for what? The invasion of Afghanistan in the spring. There's a lot of art in this book, a lot of art. This book will never be in paperback, never. My other one will. My other two will. In the spring of 1980, President Carter, proof of what a religious, always first president can do, not much. Another radical religious Bible packing missionary selling Bibles in Pennsylvania. I mean, people don't really get that, I do. Decided to boycott the Olympics in Moscow. Remember, this was the height of the Olympic movement in the United States. I know you thought I was going to say the Cold War. It was not in the height of the Cold War. I hear the contemporary over and over. The height of the Cold War was in the 50s and the 60s, and it cooled big time by the late 70s. I also hear Reagan brought an end to the Cold War. It's total bullshit. That is a great, giant misstatement in theology. It is not true. The 40 years of American strength and technology, the innovation of satellite television brought the end of the Cold War. It was dying quickly all through 70s. Technology ended the Cold War, not military might, not atom bombs dropping back and forth, not the Tsar bomb, not freaking little boy, not the 300 tests that killed my father and now they're trying to kill me. No, 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 no. Technology. Television, satellite television. Reagan just happened to be president when the wall came down. The wall was not up that long. People think the wall wasn't even built till what, 1961 or 2? He had very little to do with the wall coming down. I remember watching in 1974 a short documentary about a defected Russia pilot, USSR. He said he was, sorry about the Russia, USSR. He said we were shown a film one day that showed the American work at a construction site, and we told that they work all day and they get their lunch is a hot dog, and they explained what was in a hot dog. He said all I could think about was who's driving all those nice cars going down the street, and the construction worker, and who was driving all those cars. He said I presumed the American work was driving those cars. He made up my mind they were lying to us. This country was filthy stinking rich by 1980. Still very, very rich. The average working class by today's standards, well, between 60 and 120,000 a worker. In 1980, we boycotted the Summer Games in Moscow for one reason. The Russians had invaded Afghanistan. The same type of reason we went to Korea and Vietnam to stop the commies. Oh yeah, we did make China our economic base. 1980 coincides with the beginning of the supply side economics, and the mass military buildup trickled down on your head, and the American masses like it. Golden showers for all. And the conservative movement has started with the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. So if life is round, which I say it is, maybe this is the end of the supply side economics, the mass military buildup, and the conservative movement. But wait a minute, the Afghanistan war is still going on. It's 10 years now. This was 2 years ago I wrote this. It may by the end that it is the end never ends. We support everyone fighting against the Soviets. We supplied weapons and money. And we did in Iraq, which all started in the context of the 1979-1980 switch from the Shah of Iran to our guy, the Western guy, to the religious guys, the extreme religious guys. We poured money and weapons into Iraq because they were the long-time enemies of Iran. They had been fighting and shifting borders and country names for centuries. Religious wars. Russia had a major counter-movement of its own. They went from the extreme to the other czars to full-blown out communists. Their philosophy for 70 years had been taking their border countries out and smashing the religious ran governments like the Taliban. We did not like it. We said we will boycott the Olympics, which hurt a whole bunch of athletes and sport lovers, but did very little in the fight in Afghanistan. So no, it is not 30 years. A country has known nothing but major war. Religious fanatic extreme philosophy has echoed up through the cracks and into the 90s, become the government of Afghanistan. All those weapons and money left by sides, the USSR and the West. I do believe that life is round. It does come full circle. I do believe we are at the end of the conservative movement, much like in 1980 when we're at the end of the great progressive movement from 1932 to 1980. But like the 1980, it moved slowly for the first few years. Had been economy of the energy crisis as a mirror. I heard Gergen on CNN, the chair of Harvard politics, say at the midterms, Obama and Reagan's poll numbers were identical. In the reality, they were identical. Gergen said, quote, at the midterm election, Ronald Reagan didn't have to deal with what Barack Obama has to deal with at the midterm, massive unemployment. And all their big panel, including Bernstein, sit there and just drool on themselves. when the unemployment rate at the midterm of Reagan and Obama was identical to the decimal. To the decimal. They were identical. Then he went on to say today, but Reagan was not dealing with a 9.7 employment rate, and their 60 people political panel just nodded and drooled on themselves. Gergen was a member of Reagan's staff. Think about this. Every single vigil on CNN team. Now that does not prove the malice of CNN and the Gupta let's go fishing. You know, it's pure malice. Many making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and they are so-called experts. Now, one said, wait a minute, the unemployment rate in 1992 is exactly the same as in 2010. At both midterms, it is true there are many very similar truths in the beginning of the Reagan conservative movement and the Obama midterm and the beginning of whatever this next 30 years will become. It took Reagan a few years to get rid of Volcker, 6.5 years. Yes, the same Volcker who was on Obama's staff, the last of the demand-side economists. I do believe that Bernanke will get the boot, just like Volcker did at some point. I believe the 30 years of trickle-down in science fiction and Rand fantasy will end. I believe there are too many similarities in 1982 and 2010. I started with our economy's so-called communist enemies invading Afghanistan. I believe it will end with the so-called free market guys and the free market guys invading Afghanistan. Look at this country. It has always been guided capitalism. This free market radical spin is just that, spin. The cycle has taken its course. It has gotten corrupt. It has abused the corporate giants like BP. I have a pet peeve I like to talk about a lot in the context of the corporate giant. I am a big believer in buying America, but the problem is most Americans understand is what is America? The context of so-called American corporate giants, there are nothing American about them except their name. They make nothing here in the United States. They make it in China, India. And to name a few, they employ a very few in the United States. A few suits who spend most of their time in their homes in Vienna, the south of France, or the Caribbean. They sell a very small percentage of their products here. They pay no taxes here. It is true, they have a very high corporate tax rate in the U.S., but the entire so-called American corporations set up shop in whatever country they can to avoid the said tax. It is a fact that the average so-called American popular pays less than 2% in U.S. taxes. Again, just like employing an individual and paying him cash, it is done with a wink and a nod, even though it is illegal. Like everything in the United States for the past 30 years, we have found a way to backdoor every white-collar law in America. Avoid environmental pollution laws. Move your manufacturing plants to China. Avoid paying payroll and Social Security taxes. Pay cash. Avoid paying our health costs to employees. Pawn it off on the government. Avoid workers' laws like overtime, time and a half. Pay a lobbyist. Avoid being drafted into a war. Impoverish your masses. They will join for a job. Avoid taking care of your homeless or mentally ill. Let the cold weather handle that. Just about all. Build a school or a building in your name. Or better yet, just a name or a stadium the taxpayers paid for right here. Oh, is that so true? As the Browning, the Eccles, the Wattis, oh, you guys make me sick as your heirs would roll over as you abandon ship here. Oh, look at us, here's a name on your bill as we abandon you, go freaking live in Coronado. You're living the south of France, and the Eccles endowment Marin is set aside for here. You rob blatantly, it has been robbed. As the Eccles out there, I got a big beef. They are not Mariner's kids. I got into it with the BYU conference. He says, oh, Mariner. I said, no, Spencer is not Mariner's son. Mariner's son committed suicide over here on 24th Street. Avoid paying your share of Social Security tax. Become rich, $106,000 cutoff. Exploit your community. Do all of the above. How did the sickos pull this off? Just like they always seem to, the scams of religion. The GOP was unable to turn the major base and much of the middle into religious members, not by political party, but by religions. Voters in this country are baptized at the very young age. The religious changes doctrine to empower themselves every chance they get. It reminds me a lot of Jim Baker and Tammy Faye syndrome, I call it. Like the preacher in Florida, the mega church in Colorado, the GOP, their member believing in them not making these choices. It is God himself or the devil himself. I keep waiting for the leaders of the good, solid churches who really do believe in their principles to step up and say this is wrong, politics is not religion, and stop treating it like it is wrong. But they don't step up. They keep going along. They preach from the pulpit. The Mormons do it. The evangelicals do it. They all do it. They preach these super mega churches. What's his name? Joe. He makes me sick. Jesus Christ threw the money lenders out of the temple. These are asymmetric. The fake radical hairspray, they are asymmetric Christianity. They are the modern day devil. They have tricked all of you. These guys who claim Christianity are the opposite of Christianity. They are the devil. Jesus Christ would throw them out of the temple. Religious belief in a very personal matter, and I will never question anyone's religious policy in its conception, but I surely will question its members or leaders who gain power and use their members as an army or a mover of popular opinion. It is wrong. I live here in Utah. I am from the same town as Fawn McKay and Bernard DeVoto. which both of them right here on this campus. I went to the same high school as Fawn. I understand when the most accomplished person to ever walk out of Weber High's doors, that building's named after her uncle. Out of our hundreds and thousands of students, not one teacher, English or any other, would even mention either's name. I knew all about her. I have read her books. She is one of my favorite writers of all time. I love her work. And she died in 1908, just a few weeks after the tragic killing of John Lennon. I read a story. She had asked for a blessing from her brother, a Mormon. I understood exactly what she had went through. I grew up in the same way she grew up. It brought me to tears that day, to my eyes. All religious and philosophies should be welcome critics. It is what makes us Americans. Just because someone has a point of view, no reason to have them, is literature, and all literature must be available for all. We are Americans. Fawn's writing skills and her research are epic. That is undeniable. So are Bernard DeVoto's. They are literally giants, yet not one of thousands of Weber counties where I live will even talk or tell you who they are. They are infamous, not for their Mormon studies and writings, but for their historical work on Jefferson, on the West. They are brilliant works, Pulitzer Prize winning. Amazing. But here in Utah, where I live, it is like where politics have gone in America. A voter stands on one work and does not even think about the entire consumption of the body of work or other works. It is like gay marriage. Many voters have a passionate stand on the issue, and that controls their vote. Don't you think the parties know that? And do you think the talk radio fake all the way to the bank? Right talking heads know this? Politics has become religion, and they are laughing all the way to the bank. My guess is Limbaugh is probably a liberal. He did have Elton John sing at his wedding. Remember Colbert's interview with Bill O'Reilly? It's all an act. If you're an act, then what am I? Bill O'Reilly, Colbert. Again, I am very outspoken about a lot of things, but I would never question any religious theology at any time, and I would not question one's faith. But I do question their spilling their faith into the political arena. It flies right in the ignorant faces in regard to everything this country has stood for or tried to stand for 235 years. It is wrong, and our leaders of religious faith should come out and say it is wrong. We, over the past decade, have tried to turn into everything we fought against in the beginning of this country. We left jolly all England because of one faith determining our outcomes. We left because of the wealth and the empowered themselves to the point of the impossible rise from poverty. We fought because we felt this was wrong for 1% to have all the wealth and the freedoms and be born into it. We have revisited jolly old 1770 England for a few years, with two guys named George, the massive militaries, and the wars without provocation. It's time we put all of that to an end. It has become history. Let's turn the page. Let's let it be history. Let the artist free us. Let the painter show us the way. Let the painter free our minds. Let the literary writer, let the post-ignorant artist, let the sculptor show us how to rise above ignorance and feel the joy of humanity. We are all born with it. We lost it somewhere in the second grade, somewhere in Mrs. Smith's class, and it's all about 1967. We started thinking of our conscious self and forgot our subconscious world of creativity and space and light and lines and color. I want to read a really passionate poem right now about a little girl who I gave mouth to mouth in front of my house a few years ago. As she was dying, I saved one of them's lives. I was out there by myself. I saved one of their lives. The kids coming from Ogden High as they rolled. Melina was her name. I saved her. I tried to save her life. I gave her mouth to mouth as she died while I was giving her. I still have the shirt with the blood all over it. It is exactly 35, Melina. I wrote this 9/25/07. She died 9/25 or 9/10, I believe. 6, I believe. Melina, it is time exactly 35 years from when my dog was hit by a car as I called him to come home. A deer, the only deer I've ever saw at our farm, where I live, ran across the same spot. 2 ravens killed 2 baby robins in different spots. The end of the 7 years of the owl at the midday dies in my driveway in my big house, where so much death has come. I felt her last breath. 15/9/10/06, where the owl lied, the exact spot. The last breath for both was to the same inch of space real estate. Kevin Blanch, West Weber County, Utah. Another poem I wrote, and I'll explain this in my last chapter, which is a powerful, powerful chapter, 13. And you're saying, where's chapter 7? I haven't been able to read chapter 7 because it is so emotionally heartbreaking, but I have a spot all picked out for Tuesday. And I see the doctors again to see if I get green lighted or if I'm going to live or die. I have a very emotional spot that is emotional. I haven't even ever read it. I haven't read it for so long. Lost boy of the street. Kev, you do this because it is hard. Lost boy of the street. I, Kevin Blanch, and millions of our story, written long before we were conceived. A young man in New York State, Joseph Smith, 1805 to 1820-something, dreamed up this experiment that piggybacked the great romance of Samuel Adams and others. Born of the last of the Mohicans in the 17th century, a young Danish boy, 11 years old, holds strength to his mother's broken life. The plague has taken her other children. More than one father, maybe. We will never know, as our past bloodlines have been incorporated into the great Mormon tale. That is being molded. Anderson, with 2 S's and 2 E's. Or Mickelson, maybe, not Blanche. We are not French. It is 100 years of the Mormon experiment, synergized by the American experiment. An incredible romantic journey of pain and new art that will be discovered many years from now. I will begin this documentary on romantic tragedy today, April 10th, 1960. Kevin Blanch, Chapter 13, Freedmakers and Masons.